The clock on the cafe wall ticked louder than it should have, each second slicing through the quiet like a reminder that time, once lost, never comes back. At exactly 3 p.m., she had taken her seat by the window. By 3:47 p.m., every glance at the door felt heavier than the last, and yet, she hadn't moved. 47 minutes late, and still, she waited. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that refuses to give up even when the world says it should, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heart Touch Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Outside, the afternoon sun cast soft golden reflections on the glass, warming the quiet street. Inside, the cafe buzzed gently with life, cups clinking, low conversations drifting through the air, the comforting hum of normalcy. But at the corner table, where Aria Vance sat with her untouched tea growing cold, time had slowed to something almost unbearable. She had chosen the seat deliberately, one with a clear view of the entrance. Not because she was hopeful, but because she needed to know. Needed to see it for herself. Whether he would come, people had told her not to bother. He won't show, they had said, voices laced with certainty. Men like him never do. But Aria had learned long ago that the world was too quick to label people, too eager to write them off. And somehow, despite everything, something inside her refused to let go of the possibility that this time might be different. She adjusted the sleeve of her coat, her fingers brushing against the watch on her wrist. It was her mother's, one of the few things she had left behind. A quiet reminder that patience wasn't weakness. That sometimes, waiting was its own kind of strength. Still, doubt crept in. 47 minutes, that wasn't just late. That was forgettable. That was careless. That was, the cafe door burst open, cold air rushed in, carrying with it the sharp scent of winter and something else, urgency. Heads turned. Conversations paused. And in the doorway stood a man who looked like he had run through the storm itself to get there. His coat was dusted with snow, his hair damp, his chest rising and falling as though he had been running for miles. His eyes scanned the room frantically, wild with something that wasn't just panic, but desperation, and then he saw her. Everything about him stilled for a split second, like the world had paused just long enough for him to breathe again. Aria didn't stand. She didn't wave. She didn't even smile. She just watched, because this moment, this exact moment, would tell her everything she needed to know. His name was Elias Mercer. A single father. A man whose life had been stitched together with exhaustion, sacrifice, and quiet resilience. The kind of man people often overlooked because his struggles weren't loud, weren't glamorous, weren't something the world cared to notice. But today, he had shown up, and sometimes, that was everything. Elias took a step forward, then another, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. The cafe seemed to fade around him, the noise dulling into nothing but a distant echo. All that mattered was the woman sitting by the window, and the fact that she was still there, still waiting, because he knew what it meant. He knew what it cost. 47 minutes late. 47 minutes of doubt, of second-guessing, of wondering whether he had already ruined something that hadn't even begun yet, and yet, she hadn't left. Aria studied him carefully as he approached, her gaze taking in every detail, the worn edges of his coat, the trembling of his hands, the way his breath still came unevenly as if he hadn't stopped running. Even now, there was no arrogance in him. No carelessness. No indifference, only effort, and something deeper, something that couldn't be faked, relief. Elias finally reached the table, his voice caught somewhere between apology and disbelief. He looked like a man who had expected an empty chair and instead found something far more fragile, hope. Aria leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. But inside, something shifted because she had seen people apologize before. Heard promises before. Watched effort that lasted just long enough to impress, then vanished like it had never been real. But this didn't feel like performance, this felt like survival. Elias had almost not made it, not because he didn't care, but because life had tried everything to stop him. It had started that morning, like most of his days did, with chaos. His 6-year-old daughter, Nora, had woken up with a fever. Not high enough to panic, but enough to worry. Enough to make him hesitate. Enough to make him question whether he should cancel the meeting altogether. But Nora had insisted, her small voice determined despite the tiredness in her eyes. She had told him to go. Told him she would be fine. Told him that sometimes, important things needed a chance. Elias had almost laughed at the irony, because this meeting, this simple meeting at a cafe, felt more important than he wanted to admit. He had arranged it weeks ago, after months of quiet conversations, shared stories, and the slow, careful building of trust. Aria wasn't just someone he had met. She was someone who had listened. Someone who had seen him, not just as a father struggling to keep everything together, but as a person who still had something left to give, and that terrified him because people who saw you could also leave you. Still, he had promised he would be there. So he had made arrangements. Called in a favor from a neighbor. Prepared everything he could, and then life happened. The neighbor canceled at the last minute, the fever spiked, the bus broke down, time slipped through his fingers like sand. No matter how tightly he tried to hold onto it, every minute that passed felt like a door closing. Every delay whispered the same cruel thought: she's going to leave. By the time he finally managed to find a way to get Nora settled, to run through the streets with the cold biting at his skin, he was already too late. Or at least, he thought he was, because people didn't wait, not anymore, not in a world that moved this fast, where patience was mistaken for weakness and understanding felt like a luxury few could afford. But Arya, she had stayed, and that changed everything. As Elias stood there, struggling to find words that could somehow explain 47 minutes of absence, Arya finally spoke, not with anger, not with accusation, but with something far more disarming: understanding, not the kind that excused everything blindly, but the kind that recognized effort when it saw it, because she had her own story, her own reasons for sitting there instead of walking away. Years ago, she had been the one left waiting for someone who never came, waiting for explanations that never arrived, waiting until waiting itself became something she feared. It had taken her years to rebuild herself after that, to learn that not everyone would disappear, that not every delay meant abandonment, and yet, sitting there today, she had felt those old doubts creeping back in, whispering the same familiar lies. He's not coming. You're doing it again. You're trusting too much. But then the door had opened, and everything had changed, because sometimes, the difference between heartbreak and hope was just one person choosing to show up, even if they were late, even if the world had tried to stop them, even if it took everything they had. The afternoon slowly softened into early evening as the cafe lights warmed the room. Outside, the cold deepened, but inside, something gentle began to take shape, not something loud or overwhelming, but something quiet and real, the kind of connection that didn't need perfect timing, just honesty, just effort, just presence. And as the minutes passed, the number 47 stopped meaning lateness. It started meaning something else entirely. 47 reasons to leave, and 1 reason to stay. Before this story reaches its final moment, take a second to comment below: have you ever waited for someone who truly mattered? Your story might inspire someone else today, because sometimes, waiting isn't about time. It's about belief, and belief can change everything. That evening didn't end with grand declarations or perfect promises. It ended with something far more meaningful, a quiet understanding that life would never be perfect, that timing would never always be right, but that some people were worth the wait. Elias didn't become a perfect man overnight. His life didn't suddenly become easier. He still had responsibilities, struggles, moments where everything felt too heavy to carry, but he had shown something that day that couldn't be taught or faked. He had shown up, and Arya, she had chosen to stay. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone, or gave you hope that second chances still exist, please like, share, and subscribe to Heart Touch Stories. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them the most, because in a world that moves too fast, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is wait just a little longer, and sometimes that changes everything.